I'm going to ask you a very simple question. And hopefully, by the time we get to the end of this video, which you're probably going to want to watch all the way to the end, you're going to have a better idea of what every single Uber driver and Lyft driver faces every day. Okay? Are you ready? Here we go. Are Uber drivers independent contractors or are they employees that don't receive benefits? Simple enough question, right? Because at the end of the day, it seems like Uber and Lyft want to have it both ways. Think about it for a second. When it comes to paying benefits, extending employment protections, and other costs associated to being employees, Uber and Lyft both scream from the rooftops that we're not employees, we're independent contractors. But when it comes to controlling the platform, laying out the rules, deciding how much drivers are paid, setting the rates, and all of the access to the app, it's a different story. Okay. Suddenly, Uber has a whole lot to say about the way we work when it comes to that. And before anybody jumps into the comments, I'm not saying that we need to be listed as employees. I'm not saying that we need to be listed as independent contractors. I'm raising the question, what do you think we're classified as, or we should be classified as? What do the laws say? And is Uber and Lyft both greedy for taking the positions that they take? Before we go any further, you have to understand one thing. Uber and Lyft, their entire model is built around one very important thing, and that is driver flexibility. Okay. Without that, I don't think they would have the number of drivers that they have now. And as a matter of fact, they may not have any drivers. Maybe both companies fail right off the get go without this, but they promise that you can decide when you work, you can decide where you work, you can log on, you can log off. It's one of those things where drivers are made to feel like they are independent contractors and that they do have this autonomy and they don't have to answer to anybody. But the truth is, as drivers, and we all know this, we're all answering to an algorithm at this point. Okay. The algorithm decides where to send you, it decides the route that you take to pick up passengers, it decides the route that you take to deliver passengers, it decides what you're going to be paid. So, in what way are we independent when it comes to dealing with the passengers? I don't see a lot of independence there. I see Uber's puppet master at work controlling drivers and telling drivers exactly what they want done and when they want it done and where they want it done. Okay, so let's start with the most obvious question. Who determines what the passenger pays? And that's a simple answer. Uber does. Lyft does. Okay? We don't get to set our own rates. We don't set a per mileage rate. We don't set a per minute rate. We set no rates whatsoever. That is 100% controlled by Uber and Lyft. Uber operates the marketplace and determines the pricing structure presented through its platform, plain and simple. And the driver doesn't simply negotiate directly with the passenger or anything like that. The entire transaction is run 100% through Uber's app and Lyft's app. We have nothing to do with it as drivers. The passenger doesn't walk up to us and say, "Hey, I'll pay you $35 to run me downtown." As a matter of fact, in many locations, if that happens, I would run the opposite way because chances are that's an undercover police officer doing an investigation, and you may end up getting your car towed and getting a ticket. It's plain and simple. Uber and Lyft control it all. They control who they send the rides to. They control how much they offer to pay you. And at the end of the day, all you do is get an offer on a screen in an app, and you decide to either take it or you decide to decline it. Now, at the end of the day, Uber and Lyft have always had the same argument, and that is, hey, that's how technology works. That's the marketplace doing its job. But ask yourself this: how much control is too much control? At what point does all that control equal employment, okay, and not independent contractor? I think we're very close to that point now. All right, let's talk about who controls the work. Uber knows where you're going, okay? The app knows when you're online. It knows when you're driving. It knows where you picked up the last passenger. It knows where you drop them off. It tracks every single trip, all its activity through the entire platform from start to finish. Okay. And Uber has rules governing how drivers use that platform as well. Uber owns Uber's own policy says certain conduct can result in losing access to the platform, which I mean I can understand that. And that's where the word independent starts to become complicated. At what point do we stop being independent contractors and start being employees? It feels a lot like an employee employer type of relationship and not a contract type relationship, in my opinion. It doesn't mean I necessarily think we should be employees. As many of you know, I have often stated, I think we're a new class. I think we are a dependent contractor, plain and simple. You because an independent business owner normally has substantial control over how they operate their business. Okay. And they also have a role in negotiating the contract price. Okay. We have none of that. Drivers don't negotiate anything. We are basically, we download an app and we're basically told, hey, this is the terms of service. You're going to follow them or you're not going to drive. Plain and simple. And let's be honest, both Uber and Lyft are constantly updating that terms of service through app updates where we are then prompted before we are allowed to turn the app on. We have to agree. We don't have a choice, which, in my opinion, if you are being strong armed into an agreement, it's no agreement at all. Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, we operate inside of a system that is designed, programmed, and monitored 100% by Uber or Lyft. Okay. There's no independent third party that oversees any of this. There's very little government oversight. And these are things that need to change if this industry is going to continue. All right. So the next thing we're going to talk about is actually, I think, our strongest argument. If you wanted to argue that we are employees and not contractors, I think this is where the argument would probably be victorious for drivers who want that. And that is the acceptance rate issue. Now, I know that acceptance rate really doesn't play a huge role in all marketplaces in the country, but here in Maryland, it does play a big role. Okay. You have to keep your acceptance rate above a minimum threshold, or you basically lose access to the airport queues. So you're not prioritized, which if you're not prioritized, you get very little offers while you're sitting at the airport. But more importantly, they take away a 5% pay bump. Okay. So basically what you receive is a 5% pay reduction if your acceptance rate drops too low. Now, I don't know about you, but I feel like that sounds a lot like being an employee and not a contractor. And look, I have really no preference either way. Sometimes I lean more towards being an employee, and sometimes I'm like, no, we're independent contractors. And I think it's a mix of both. But I do think one thing is 100% true, and that is if Uber and Lyft are going to claim that we're independent contractors, then we need to truly be independent. Okay, let's do away with the whole acceptance rate thing. Let's go back to a rate card. Let's put everybody on equal footing. Plain and simple. And then you can make the argument that no, we're independent contractors. But when you start dangling the acceptance rate issue over top of drivers and using it to control drivers and manipulate how they decide to take rides, when they decide to take rides, and what rides they decide to take, I feel like that's dangerously close to having a boss. And I don't care if that boss is a person, a kangaroo, or an algorithm. It's still a boss. It's something or someone telling you what to do and how to do it. And that sounds a lot like being an employee, doesn't it? Let me know what you think. Drop a comment below. And I'm not talking about would you rather be an employee or would you rather be an independent contractor? I'm asking, what does it sound like to you? Okay. We're kind of in dangerous waters because I know it's probably going to upset some people who want to be employees. It's going to upset others who want to stay independent contractors. Um, and none of this is really indicating that anything is about to change. I think that it would be one of those things where a lawsuit would change it, or some type of legislation, or a re-examining of labor laws in that state. Maybe then it would change. But right now, we're just talking about what you, me, passengers, whoever, what you think we are. And I'd love to hear everybody's comments. So please drop a comment. And thank you so much for watching the video. I appreciate it. See everybody in the next video. Thanks.